silence of the abyssal plane is a lie. It's a crushing symphony of pressure, the subtle groan of the Earth's crust, and the frantic thumping of your own heart amplified in your ears. 60 feet above the silt, suspended in a cathedral of black water, I coaxed the shimmering, anemone-shaped locket from its resting place within the skeletal fingers of a long-lost merchant ship's figurehead. My lights cut a swathe through the perpetual night, glinting off the barnacle-encrusted wood. It wasn't just skill that led me here. It was a peculiar thrumming in my temples, a resonance I'd learned to trust, a faint song only I could hear, guiding me to objects misplaced by time. As the locket came free, the water around me seemed to shimmer, to thicken for a heartbeat, and a chill, deeper than the ocean's cold, brushed my spine. I ignored it, a familiar phantom, and began my ascent. That intuition, as my grandfather called it, was both a gift and a constant, unnerving companion. My name is Lyra Kai. For the past decade, since Grandfather Arian took me in after my parents vanished on their own deep-sea expedition, searching for whispers of a city named Nycturia, I've chased these echoes. He, a renowned historian of lost civilizations, filled my youth with tales of sunken wonders and forgotten lore, fueling my own obsession, perhaps as a way to keep their memory, their quest, alive. My parents were brilliant, driven, and now, just a collection of faded photographs and unanswered questions. Their disappearance left a void, a cold spot in my soul that only the thrill of discovery, or the faintest hope of finding a trace of them, could temporarily warm. The locket fetched a handsome sum, enough to keep my small research vessel, the Echo Finder, afloat and my creditors at bay for another 6 months. It was during the celebration, a solitary glass of scotch in my cluttered cabin, surrounded by charts and sonar printouts, that the encrypted message arrived. It was from a Dr. Genevieve Armitage, a name synonymous with groundbreaking, if sometimes controversially funded, marine archaeology. The proposal was audacious. A fully equipped, generously compensated lead diver position on an expedition to locate and explore the legendary Nycturia. The Nycturia, my parents' final obsession. My breath caught. 2 weeks later, I stood on the deck of the Abyssal Wanderer, a state-of-the-art research vessel that made my Echo Finder look like a bathtub toy. Dr. Armitage was as striking in person as her reputation suggested. Sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through you, an easy charisma that drew you in, and an energy that belied her 45 years. She moved with a dancer's grace, her voice a melodious contralto that commanded attention effortlessly. "Ms. Kai," she said, extending a hand, her smile genuine but with a keen edge. "Your reputation precedes you. Your unique success rate in locating otherwise lost artifacts is quite remarkable." Standing beside her, looking considerably less robust, was Captain Alistair Finch. He was the expedition's financier, a man in his late 60s, his skin the color of old parchment, his frame frail beneath an expensive nautical jacket. A persistent, shallow cough punctuated his sentences. His eyes, however, burned with a desperate, almost feverish hope. He saw Nycturia not just as a discovery, but perhaps as a last chance. For what? He didn't say. He mumbled a greeting, his gaze already drifting towards the deep azure water, as if expecting answers to surface from its depths. The briefing room was a technological marvel. Holographic displays shimmered, showing bathymetric data and projected layouts of what they believed was Nycturia, nestled in a trench deeper than any ID Deve. Mateo Diaz, the chief submersible engineer, a stoic man with calloused hands and a reassuringly calm demeanor, ran through the technical specifications of the Nautilus, our primary descent vehicle. Dr. Lena Hansen, a brilliant linguist and an old friend from my university days, her face alight with academic excitement, presented what little was known of Nycturian script, mostly indecipherable glyphs found on scattered dubious tablets. Then Dr. Armitage stepped forward, the lights dimming slightly. Her voice lost some of its easy charm, taking on a new gravity. Nycturia is not just an ancient site, Miss Kai, Mr. Diaz, Dr. Hansen. It is unique, and as such, there are certain protocols, garnered from fragmented texts, and frankly, some rather unsettling local legends passed down through generations of seafarers in this remote stretch of ocean. For your safety and the integrity of the mission, they are non-negotiable. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The gentle hum of the ship's engines seemed to recede. First, Armitage began, her gaze sweeping over us. Never, under any circumstances, remove your diving equipment if you are outside the Nautilus, even if the water appears to disappear around you. What you perceive may not be reality. Trust your gear, not your senses. My skin prickled. I thought of that shimmering thickness of water by the figurehead. Second, she continued, her voice dropping slightly. If you see writing that shifts and changes on the walls, do not attempt to read it twice. Document it with your helmet cam on the first pass, then avert your gaze. Prolonged observation has been linked to severe cognitive disorientation in the anecdotal accounts. Lena shifted uneasily beside me. And third, Armitage's voice was now a low, clear tone that resonated in the silent room. When, or if you hear a distinct humming, a sound that seems to emanate not from the water, but from inside your own head, you surface. Immediately. No delay. No investigation. That is an immutable directive. It is believed that something ancient, something within Nycturia, may attempt to establish a connection. We must not allow that. Silence followed, thick and heavy. I looked at Mateo. His face was unreadable. Lena was pale. Lena was pale. Captain Finch coughed. A dry, rasping sound. The rules were bizarre, chillingly specific, far removed from any standard diving safety briefing I'd ever attended. They hinted at a danger far more insidious than nitrogen narcosis or equipment failure. Later that evening, strapped into the cramped cockpit of the Nautilus alongside Mateo, with Lena and Armitage in the small aft compartment, we began our first descent. The massive launch bay doors of the Abyssal Wanderer slid open, revealing the inky blackness below. As the submersible disengaged and the surface world vanished above us, a profound, almost sentient cold permeated the titanium sphere. It wasn't just the dropping temperature. It was something else. A familiar, unwelcome thrumming started in my temples, stronger this time, sharper. The hull of the Nautilus, designed to withstand unimaginable pressures, gave a sudden, disconcerting creak, a sound like old bones settling. All around us, the abyss waited, ancient and intelligent, and I had the sudden, chilling certainty that it knew we were coming. The descent into the Nycturian trench was a journey into primordial memory. Light from the Nautilus' powerful external spots sliced through the water, illuminating nothing for what felt like an eternity. Then finally, structures. They weren't built so much as grown or willed into existence. Colossal, cyclopean architecture that defied human geometry. Surfaces that seemed to absorb light, and everywhere, an impossible, profound silence that pressed in on the hull. It felt less like a city, and more like the corpse of some colossal, petrified organism. A disquieting sense of being watched prickled at the back of my neck, a feeling I couldn't shake even within the metal confines of the sub. Fascinating, Armitage murmured from behind me, her voice a low hum of scholarly rapture, though her eyes, reflected in the main viewport, held a different, more intense gleam. Lena was practically vibrating with excitement, her fingers already flying across her data slate, cataloging the bizarre hieroglyphs that adorned every surface. Mateo, bless his pragmatic soul, just kept his focus on the sub's telemetry, his brow furrowed slightly as unusual energy readings flickered across his console. Unidentified energy signatures, erratic but localized around the city's core. he reported, his voice flat. Nothing natural I am familiar with. Our first excursion in the heavy-duty exosuits was to a plaza dominated by what looked like a frozen wave of obsidian. The material pulsed with a faint internal luminescence, like captured starlight. It was here, as I was taking geological samples, that the first rule was truly tested. The water around me, within a 10-foot radius, didn't just disappear, it vanished. One moment, the familiar green-tinged murk. The next, a clear, breathable pocket of air, thick and cloying, smelling faintly of ozone and something else. Something metallic and ancient, like blood dried for millennia. Instinct screamed at me to rip off my helmet, to gasp in what felt like an unexpected reprieve. But Armitage's warning echoed in my mind. I held my breath, squeezed my eyes shut, counting. The pressure in my ears intensified. A strange hissing sound filled the void. My lungs burned. Then, just as suddenly as it had vanished, the water was back, surging around me, the illusion broken. Shaken, I checked my seals. The experience left a residue of deep unease, a feeling that the very fabric of reality here was a suggestion, not a law. Lena, meanwhile, was having a field day, or rather, a field abyss. The glyphs were unlike anything she'd encountered. A complex tapestry of spirals, eyes, and serrated lines. It's not a language as we understand it, Lyra, she'd later confide, her voice hushed over a shared protein bar back on the Abyssal Wanderer. It's more like a direct imprint of thought or sensation. I found a recurring motif. It translates roughly to the sleeper dreams, or maybe the dreamer waits. A shiver traced its way down my spine. What exactly was sleeping down there? Waiting for what? The air in the cramped mess hall suddenly felt too thin. That night, sleep was a battlefield of fractured images. My parents waving from the deck of their doomed ship, the shifting glyphs of Nycturia, eyes opening in the deep. I woke with a jolt, a faint melodic humming just at the edge of hearing, a sound that seemed to be coming from my own pillow. I sat bolt upright, heart hammering. Silence. Just the thrum of the ship's generators and the distant sigh of the ocean. But the unsettling feeling lingered, a subtle dissonance in the quiet. Somewhere, deep below, Nycturia was stirring. Grandfather Arian always said some doors are best left unopened. I was beginning to understand why. Each dive took us deeper into the city's labyrinthine heart. We discovered vast amphitheaters where no audience could have sat, towering spires that pierced the abyssal gloom, and strange, bioluminescent flora that pulsed with an unhealthy, captivating light. Neither plant nor animal, but something animal between, something that seemed to react to our presence with subtle shifts in its glow. The air within the Nautilus grew thick with unspoken tension, the initial thrill of discovery slowly being overshadowed by a creeping dread. Lena's obsession with the Nycturian script intensified. She spent hours hunched over her console, her normally bright eyes shadowed with fatigue, muttering to herself as she cross-referenced symbols. It was during one such session, while attempting to translate a particularly long inscription within a ceremonial chamber, that the second rule asserted its dominance. Lyra, Matteo, look at this, she called, her voice tight with excitement, pointing her helmet cam at a section of wall. The glyphs shimmered, their lines flowing like quicksilver. They're rearranging. It's like they're responding to my light. Fascinated, despite Armitage's diktat, she leaned closer, her helmet almost touching the cold, ancient stone. It says, "The path uncoils for the willing mind. The vessel awaits." Then, her head snapped back. A choked gasp escaped her. She swayed, pressing her hands to her temples. The words, they're burning, she cried. Her voice strained. She stumbled. her movements jerky, speaking in a rapid, unintelligible stream of syllables that bore no resemblance to any known language. It was pure primal sound. Matteo reacted instantly, grabbing her arm, pulling her back from the wall. "Lina!" Snap out of it. But her eyes were unfocused, rolling slightly. The attack, for lack of a better word, passed as quickly as it came, leaving her pale, trembling, and with a splitting headache that lasted for hours. She remembered nothing of the altered text, only the searing pain. Afterwards, her gaze would sometimes drift, a vacant look in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Captain Finch's condition was worsening. His cough was more persistent, his breathing more labored. He spent most of his time in his cabin, poring over old maritime charts and Armitage's increasingly optimistic, and to my ears, increasingly unhinged, progress reports. Armitage, for her part, seemed to glow with an almost vampiric energy, feeding off Finch's desperation and the city's oppressive atmosphere. "We are on the cusp of rewriting human history, Captain," I overheard her telling him one evening, her voice smooth as poison silk. "Nycturia holds secrets that will redefine our understanding of life itself, perhaps even extend it." "Extend it." Finch clutched at her words like a drowning man to a life raft. The subtle pressure on my own mind was increasing. Whispers just below the threshold of hearing seemed to slither around the edges of my perception when I was alone in my bunk. Sometimes, I'd catch fleeting, impossible images in the corner of my eye. A tentacle vanishing around a corridor corner on the ship, a face in the static of a dead monitor. And the dreams, they were becoming more vivid, more insistent. I saw my father, Arian, not as he was in my memories, but younger, standing on a precipice within Nycturia, his face etched with a terrible understanding. He'd point, not towards treasure, but towards a specific, dark crevice in the city's architecture. His expression one of urgent warning before the image dissolved into swirling, inky blackness. I started triple-checking the seals on my emergency beacon before every dive, a cold knot of foreboding tightening in my stomach. The hum. It started as a faint vibration during a dive into what Armitage theorized was Nycturia's central temple, a vast domed structure pulsating with an energy that made my teeth ache. At first, I dismissed it as a resonance from the Nautilus thrusters, or perhaps an inner ear imbalance from the extreme pressure. But it grew. A low, insistent thrumming that bypassed the ears entirely, vibrating deep within my skull, resonating in my bones. It had a strange, almost hypnotic quality, pulling at my consciousness like an invisible tide. Armitage, her eyes fever-bright, seemed oblivious or perhaps receptive to it. "Can you feel it, Lyra?" she breathed, her hand on my shoulder, her touch surprisingly cold. "The city is awakening." Lina felt it first, or rather succumbed to it. We were mapping a series of interconnected tunnels, their walls carved with unsettlingly organic patterns, when she suddenly stopped, her head tilted, a strange, serene smile spreading across her face. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice an airy monotone. "It's calling me." The hum in my own head intensified, clawing for purchase. I fought against a sudden, overwhelming urge to open my helmet, to join the sound. "Lina? Lina?" I said, my voice tight. "What are you hearing?" Her smile widened, becoming something unnatural. "The song of unmaking," she replied, her eyes losing focus, becoming milky white. "The Harbinger. It wants a choir." It wants a choir. Then, with a strength that belied her slender frame, she lunged for her helmet clasps, her fingers fumbling, desperate. "Let me in. I want to sing." Panic flared. This was it. Rule 3. "Matteo, get her!" I yelled, my own head swimming with the disorienting hum, fighting off waves of nausea and a strange, seductive lethargy. Matteo, his face grim, wrestled with Lena. She fought with a frenzied, almost inhuman power, her nails scraping against his visor. The hum in my skull reached a fever pitch, threatening to tear my consciousness apart. This wasn't just a sound. It was an invasion. Surface, now! I screamed over the comms, transmitting to the Abyssal Wanderer. Rule 3 is active. Repeat Rule 3. Armitage, to my horror, made no move to help. She watched Lena's struggles with an unnerving, analytical detachment. Her lips parted in a rictus of fascination. Remarkable, she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. The preliminary stages of cortical integration. Matteo, with a grunt of effort, finally managed to subdue Lena, pinning her thrashing form against the tunnel wall. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anger. The sub-controls are sluggish. Something's interfering. He fought with the joystick, the Nautilus responding with agonizing slowness. The hum was trying to lull us into submission to keep us here, in its domain. Every instinct screamed to escape, to reach the distant, sunlit surface that now felt like a forgotten dream. The city, the entity within it, didn't want us to leave. It had found a potential voice in Lena, and it was hungry for more. Back on the Abyssal Wanderer, after a harrowing ascent where the Nautilus bucked and stalled as if fighting an unseen current, Lena was sedated and confined to the medbay. She thrashed in her sleep, muttering in that same alien tongue, her skin clammy and cold. Later, during a brief moment of lucidity, her eyes cleared, filled with a terrifying understanding. She clutched my hand, a grip like iron. Lyra. It's not dead. It's chained. It wants out. Her voice was a ragged whisper. The walls, they aren't just stone. They hum. Don't let Armitage. Her eyes rolled back as she slipped into unconsciousness again, leaving her warning hanging in the sterile air of the medbay like a curse. Late that night, unable to sleep, I accessed the ship's secure archives, looking for anything on my father's last expedition. Hidden deep within a corrupted data file, almost erased, was a single audio log. His voice, Lyra Kai's voice, crackled through the static, strained and urgent. Not a city of treasures, Lyra Bug, if you ever find this. It's a prison. A resonance cage for something. Something that fell. The humming. It's how it breaks the lock. It needs a new key. The recording ended abruptly, in a burst of static, and a sound that might have been a scream, or something far, far worse. A new key. My blood ran cold. A new key, the way Armitage looked at me. The strange resonance I felt with Nycturian artifacts. My own resistance to the city's immediate effects. It wasn't just a job anymore. This was my legacy. A terrible inheritance. And the Harbinger, it seemed, knew my name. The air on the Abyssal Wanderer grew colder. Not just in temperature, but in spirit. Lena remained mostly unresponsive in the medbay, a living conduit for the city's suffocating will, sometimes whispering phrases in that alien tongue, her eyes tracking unseen things across the ceiling. Matteo, bless his stoic heart, doubled down on system diagnostics, his usual calm replaced by a grim, watchful tension, muttering about anomalous energy spikes that mirrored Lena's episodes. Finch, confined to his quarters, was a ghost of himself, his hope curdling into a toxic brew of fear and denial, fed by Armitage's increasingly fervent reassurances. I knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in my bones, that our next dive would be our last, one way or another. Armitage was the epicenter of the ship's decaying sanity. She moved with a predatory grace, her eyes alight with an unholy fire. She'd visit Lena, not with concern, but with a notepad, recording the alien syllables, her expression one of rapturous discovery. "She's adapting, Lyra," Armitage told me, her voice dripping with an almost religious zeal. "The Harbinger is choosing its vessel. A symbiotic relationship, a leap in human evolution. Imagine the knowledge, the power. I saw no evolution, only a horrifying violation. My father's warning. It needs a new key." Echoed relentlessly. The final descent, as Armitage termed it, was ostensibly to retrieve a unique energy signature from the very heart Scylla. A term I now suspected referred to a specific chamber or artifact crucial to the Harbinger's full awakening. Finch, too weak to object, had signed off on it, desperate for any sliver of Armitage's promised miracle. As we prepped the Nautilus, I saw Armitage discreetly slip a small, intricately carved obsidian idol, something I hadn't cataloged, into her dive kit. Alarm bells, loud and frantic, screamed in my head. Down in the abyssal dark, Nycturia felt different, alert. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by a cacophony of whispers just beyond hearing. The thrumming now a palpable force that vibrated the very hull of the Nautilus. The bioluminescent flora pulsed in an agitated, syncopated rhythm. The city seemed to be breathing, its ancient lungs filling with anticipation. Lena, heavily sedated for the dive by Armitage's insistence, began to stir in the aft compartment as we approached the central temple. Her eyes snapped open, no longer milky, but glowing with a faint internal luminescence that mirrored the city's strange light. A low, guttural sound rumbled from her chest, syncing with the thrum outside. Then, she lunged, not at us, but at a control panel, smashing it with fists that moved with impossible speed and strength. Warning sirens blared. Mateo cursed, wrestling with unresponsive controls. The Nautilus shuddered violently, its systems going haywire. "It's trying to take control of the sub," Mateo yelled, his face slick with sweat. "The integration is accelerating," Armitage cried, not with fear, but with triumph. She turned to me, her face a mask of ecstatic madness. "It knows you're here, Lyra. Your lineage. Your father tried to stop it, to understand it, just as I am understanding it now. He was weak. You have the resonance it craves, the key it was denied." Before I could react, the Nautilus slammed into something solid. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into emergency reds. We were inside the central temple, a vast, cavernous space where the Nycturian architecture converged in a disturbing vortex of impossible angles. At its center, a colossal, crystalline structure pulsed with an inner light, the source of the sickening hum. And floating before it, not quite touching it, was something that had once been Lena, but was now far, far more. Her body elongated, her limbs contorting, a shadowy, multi-limbed aura flickering around her like heat haze. The Harbinger was manifesting. "Behold!" Armitage shrieked, unstrapping herself, holding the obsidian idol aloft. "The catalyst! The bridge?" She began to chant in the same alien syllables Lena had uttered, her voice rising in a grotesque plainsong. Finch, watching on the monitors from his cabin, finally understood. A strangled sob escaped him. I heard his voice, faint and broken over the comms. "Nah, Genevieve, what have you done?" Then, a series of explosions rocked the abyssal wanderer far above. Red alerts flashed on our damaged console. Hull breach imminent. Finch, in his final desperate act, was trying to scuttle the ship, to take Nycturia, Armitage, and the Harbinger down with him. The Harbinger Lena entity turned its glowing eyes towards Armitage, not with gratitude, but with a cold alien hunger. Tendrils of shadow erupted from it, lancing towards her. Armitage screamed, not in triumph, but in sudden, abject terror. as the shadows enveloped her, the obsidian idol clattering to the floor. Her form flickered, merged with the shadows, her cries dissolving into the all-consuming hum. The Harbinger wasn't looking for a partner. It was looking for fuel, for a stronger anchor. And then its gaze, ancient and infinitely cold, fell on me. The pressure in my skull was unbearable. The hum sought to tear me apart, to unmake me and reshape me. But with it came a flood of images, my father not warning, but showing. He pointed to a specific sequence of glyphs on the crystalline structure, then to his own chest, then to a small, almost invisible fissure near the base of the spire. Resonance cage. The key. Break the lock. His meaning, fragmented yet urgent, pierced through the Harbinger's assault. Matteo, seeing his chance amidst the chaos, grabbed a heavy emergency toolkit. Lyra, if you've got a plan, now's the time. Now's the time, he yelled, positioning himself between me and the pulsating entity, his face a mask of grim determination. I'll buy you some seconds, he charged, swinging the heavy toolkit like a club. The Harbinger Lina recoiled slightly, its shadowy tendrils lashing out. But Matteo, with the desperate strength of a cornered man, battered at its shifting form, forcing it back, if only for a moment. My father's insides, the resonance cage, my own strange connection. I focused on the glyphs he'd shown me, on the specific frequency of the thrum that resonated strongest within me. It wasn't about resisting. Perhaps it was about redirecting, disrupting. I pressed my hand to the cool metal of the Nautilus' damaged hull, trying to channel the chaotic energy, to push back with my own specific resonance, aiming it not at the entity, but at the fissure my father had shown me in the crystalline structura. A high-pitched shriek, a sound that tore at the fabric of reality, erupted from the Harbinger. The light from the central crystal flared, then fractured. Cracks spread across its surface like black lightning. The hum faltered, stuttered, then dropped in pitch, becoming a wounded, discordant howl. Matteo staggered back, his exosuit smoking, one arm hanging limp. The shadowy tendrils around Lina receded, her form shrinking, becoming more human, though still horrifically distorted. She collapsed, twitching. Its frequency, it's disrupting the core matrix, Matteo gasped, pointing at the fracturing crystal. But the Harbinger wasn't finished. A final desperate pulse of energy, a wave of pure malice, surged from the dying crystal, aimed directly at me. Matteo, with a roar, threw himself in its path. I saw the energy hit him, saw his exosuit spark and buckle, saw the light dim in his eyes before he crumpled to the floor of the Nautilus, motionless. His sacrifice bought me the last second I needed. The crystalline structure imploded, not with a bang, but with a deafening rush of silence, a vacuum that sucked the light and sound from the temple. The Harbinger Lina shrieked, a sound of pure agony, and then its form dissolved, imploding into a pinpoint of light that vanished. Silence. A true, dead silence. The emergency lights of the Nautilus flickered back on, casting long, dancing shadows. Matteo lay still. Lina, curled in a fetal position, was just Lina again, pale and unconscious. And outside, Nycturia felt empty. For now, the Abyssal Wanderer was gone. Our comms were dead. We were alone, thousands of feet beneath the surface, in a dying submersible, in a city that had, for a brief, terrifying moment, held the universe in its thrall. The silence in the Nautilus was a crushing weight, heavier than the tons of water pressing in from all sides. Matteo was gone. His sacrifice, a raw, jagged hole in the already battered fabric of my reality. I knelt beside him, my gloved hand resting on his cracked visor. A silent thank you. A bitter farewell. There was no time for grief, not yet. Survival was a relentless, immediate demand. Lena began to stir, a low moan escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, human now, but filled with a profound, vacant horror. She remembered fragments, enough to understand the abyss she'd brushed against. Armitage. The song, she whispered, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the condensation inside her helmet. It's still in my head, faint, but primary systems were offline. Life support was dwindling. The Nautilus was a crippled metal coffin at the bottom of the world. My father's voice echoed in my memory. The city is resonance. It wants a key. Had I broken it, or just detuned it? The emptiness outside felt fragile, like a held breath. I salvaged what I could. Emergency power cells, a manual distress beacon, a long shot, given our depth and the likely destruction of the Abyssal Wanderer. My dive logs, Lena's fragmented data, Armitage's corrupted research files. These were our only testament. Proof, if we ever made it back, that this hadn't all been a pressure-induced hallucination. But the most critical discovery was amongst Armitage's things. Schematics for a deep-sea geothermal vent nearby. One an advanced sub like the Nautilus might be able to harness for a desperate, short burst of power. If its systems could be rerouted, it was highly experimental, incredibly dangerous, and our only hope. Hours blurred into a desperate race against time and dwindling oxygen. My hands, raw and trembling, worked over the damaged circuitry, guided by Mateo's meticulously labeled schematics and my own frantic improvisations. Lena, despite her trauma, assisted. Her knowledge of the subsystems invaluable. Her movements slow but precise, driven by a primal will to live. Outside, Nycturia remained eerily still. But I couldn't shake the feeling that its silence was watchful, that its gaze hadn't truly departed, merely shifted. As I jury-rigged the final connection, a low thrum started again. Not the overwhelming hum of the Harbinger, but something far more subtle. A faint, almost inaudible vibration from the city itself. The walls of the temple seemed to shimmer faintly. It was awakening, or perhaps something else within it was. Lyra, Lena breathed, her eyes wide. It's not over. The emergency power channels surged, the Nautilus groaning in protest. Thrusters sputtered, then, miraculously, engaged. We rose, agonizingly slow, from the floor of the dead temple, leaving Mateo behind in the crushing dark. As we ascended through the haunted streets Scylla, I saw them, faint, ethereal shapes coalescing in the gloom, drawn perhaps by the resurrected power of the sub, or by the city's returning consciousness. Not the Harbinger as it was, but echoes, residual fragments of its will, or perhaps other, lesser denizens of Nycturia disturbed by our intrusion. They drifted towards us, translucent and spectral, their forms indistinct but undeniably reaching. I pushed the thrusters to their failing limit, the Nautilus groaning under the strain. A desperate flight from a city that refused to relinquish its dead or its secrets. They found us 3 days later. Adrift, life support failing. The Nautilus a battered wreck. Or rather, an automated UN oceanic patrol drone detected our faint, intermittently pulsing distress beacon. The official story, carefully constructed from our fragmented trauma-laced testimonies and the scant, corrupted data, was that the Abyssal Wanderer had suffered a catastrophic implosion due to an uncharted seismic event while investigating extreme geothermal anomalies. Captain Finch went down with his ship. Dr. Armitage, Mateo Diaz, declared lost at sea, presumed dead. Lena and I were the sole, miraculously lucky survivors, suffering from extreme deep-sea psychosis and acute post-traumatic stress. Nycturia was dismissed as legend, a ghost story fueled by Finch's desperation and Armitage's ambition. The anomalous energy readings were attributed to the same seismic activity that supposedly destroyed the Wanderer. My father's research, what little remained, was filed away under speculative and uncorroborated. The world wanted a simple explanation, a tragedy they could comprehend, not a horror that lurked beyond the veil of their understanding. Lena never fully recovered. The song, she said, was always there, a faint, insistent whisper at the edge of her hearing, a cold spot in her mind where the Harbinger had touched her. She dedicated herself to obscure linguistic studies, forever searching for a way to understand, perhaps to exorcise, the echoes in her soul. We remained close, bound by a shared trauma no one else could fathom. I returned to a world that felt alien, too bright, too loud. The whispers of Nycturia never truly left me. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of the night, I would feel that familiar thrum in my bones, a chilling reminder of the abyss. I tried to warn them to speak of what truly happened, but my words were met with pitying smiles and recommendations for further psychiatric care. The sole survivor narrative was a powerful one, easily twisted into one of delusion. Years passed. I inherited my grandfather's library, his legacy. Amongst his oldest, most dust-laden tomes, I found it. A journal bound in what felt unnervingly like preserved skin. It wasn't his, it was my father's, Lyra Kai's. True lost journal, hidden where he knew only I. Steeped in grandfather's lore. Might one day look. The entries were chilling. He had realized Nycturia was a prison. He had understood the Harbinger was a fallen entity, an ancient intelligence of immense power, caged by beings even older. He hadn't tried to destroy it. He tried to reinforce the cage, to understand its resonant frequencies, to keep it dormant. His death wasn't an accident. He'd attempted a ritual, a desperate gamble to sever his own life force and bind a part of his consciousness to Nycturia's core, to become a silent, eternal warden, a counter-resonance against the Harbinger. He'd hoped to buy humanity time, perhaps eons. My actions, my key-like resonance, hadn't just disrupted the Harbinger. They had inadvertently weakened my father's spectral chains. The emptiness I'd felt was the brief period of his reasserted control, his consciousness momentarily boosted by the destruction Scylla's focusing crystal, before the Harbinger itself began to regroup. The final entry was a plea, a terrible burden passed on. It will wake again, Lyra Bug. The cage is damaged. It needs a new warden. Your blood, your resonance. You are the only one now who can feel its song and not break. Do not let it sing to the world. The watch must be kept. Now I understand. My gift, my intuition, that resistance to the city's immediate effects. It was never a shield. It was an attunement, a legacy, a key, yes, but also a lock. The Harbinger slumbers, wounded but not dead, deep in the crushing dark. And I, Lyra Kai, am its unwilling, unending sentinel. Sometimes, when the tide is low and the moon is new, I swear I can hear a faint, melodic humming carried on the wind, rising from the deepest, blackest trenches of the sea. And I know it is waiting, and I know one day I will have to answer its call, not as a victim, but as the reluctant guardian of a horror that must never, ever reach the surface. The abyss has a long memory, and my watch has only just begun. Nycturia holds its secrets tight, guarded by rules etched in fear and whispers from the deep. Lyra Kai learned that some treasures are best left undisturbed. The Harbinger sleeps, but its song is eternal, and its hunger is vast. This is only the beginning of the watch. Seriously, if you didn't stay until the very end, you missed the deepest secret. The twist that reveals the true, terrifying scope of the abyss and your terrible inheritance. The final moments change everything. What do you think the Harbinger truly is? What was Dr. Armitage seeking? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you made it out of the crushing dark, if the city hasn't claimed you, then you're already a part of our story. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules, because some depths, they never truly let you go, and the hum is always listening.